Amelia's bustling about on various.
We're live.
We're live. Welcome everybody to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. It's Friday, March
20th.
Wow, Friday, March 20th. We are here to hear from Green Mountain Power on S202, our plug-in solar bill. I'm Rep. Kathleen James from Manchester.
Chris Morrow, Windsor Bennington.
Sir, volume one.
Oh,
Good call, yeah.
With that one. Yep, there we go. Thank you. Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2. Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Derek Ford, Washington 2.
Graham Putner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Scott Campbell.
They to work again. Thank God for it.
all right. And here joining us in the room.
Dylan Zucki when you're not.
Great.
I'm Jada Gleason, intern for Burn.
Super. So we have 20 minutes for now, and we can certainly have you back for the record.
Candace Morgan, Green Mountain Power. All right, so I'm here today to talk about S202, which is related to portable solar. And I know you've had a week full of really good and helpful testimony, so I'll call back to some of that as it makes sense, and happy to also come back at any point in time as you all work through the bill. If you have any revisions, other things, we're happy to continue to weigh in and follow this. So overall, we are supportive of the bill as passed the Senate. There's a couple of key reasons for us that we feel that way. Number one, similar to what you've heard from the department, from other utilities, and from some of your witnesses yesterday, I think it is really important to have the UL listing requirement in there to make sure that these devices are safe and operating under the requirements that are required from that, and keep them safe for everyone. Another part that the Senate added, which we had asked for and discussed in the committee, was related to existing net metering customers. So you'll note a provision in the bill that wasn't in the bill as introduced, but was included in the Senate version, clarifying that if a customer has an existing net metering system, they cannot also have a portable solar device. And there's a couple of reasons that we felt like that was helpful. And the biggest one is really related to customer clarity and understanding of what their generation is at their house and what it's meaning for their bill. So as I think you heard about in the overview, if a customer chooses to have one of these devices and plugs it into their house and it's generating, it'll essentially just show up on their bill like reduced consumption, right? There's not going to be a line item or anything that shows what it was generating. It'll just show up like reduced consumption. And so when you have an existing net metering system, I think it can just, and you also were to have one of these devices, it would create like further confusion in terms of what is performing and what's being calculated in that way, and what our system is seeing. And so it just felt like, for simplicity's sake, to clarify that this is not in addition to a net metering system. So we were appreciative of the Senate's add in that space. On that same subject, the other reason why we are supportive of the bill is that it's not creating a new incentive structure or rate for payment of the generation from these devices either. And so we're supportive of that versus creating something that would be potentially paid for by other customers. So keeping it just as a reduction of real-time load, I think, is the best way to manage that from a cost perspective. And on that subject too, agree with the department's clarifying language around changing excess generation to generation exported to the grid, which I believe is on page 2 of the bill. In terms of what that compensation looks like, yeah, it's the bottom of page 2 under sub D, where it says a portable solar energy generation device shall not be eligible for net metering. Excess generation set back into the grid by one of these devices shall not be compensated. And just clarifying that to say generation exported to the grid. So we agree with that clarification. Another add that was discussed and then implemented in the Senate passed version related to having a requirement that a home that is using one of these systems have a smart meter. the vast majority of our customers do have AMI smart meters, but there's anywhere between 7 to 10,000, depending on the year, customers that have opted out of having a smart meter for whatever reason. And depending on which of those devices they have, introducing something like this would actually potentially create a situation where the meter shows that they're consuming more when they're producing, which is obviously counter to what this technology is meant to do. And that's just because of the nature of that technology, the smart meter, or sorry, the metering technology. So for ease of customer clarification and also having it work the way they intend, the best way to manage that is for folks to have a smart meter on their house. So that language is also added into the space.
Can I ask a question on that? So what happens if somebody is using a dumb meter, an old meter?
Yeah.
You said it might record the generation of its usage.
That's correct. It depends on which type of meter they have on their home. That's right. Different types of dumb or not smart meters might have a different outcome there. And so that's why we try to capture it to just say that as long as they have a smart meter, they should be good in that space. But there are some of those older technologies that are still out there. Not a ton, but just a couple.
What's a generic term? Analog meters or something? Or I don't know what it,
yeah. I think that's
are there up to date analog meters that would not have that problem that people could opt for?
There are, but I don't have the details on like the specific names or how what we're deploying still, right? So I think a lot of the ones that I'm highlighting, they're not ones that we would necessarily be installing now, but they might be out there.
I guess that's what I'm asking. If somebody doesn't want a smart meter because of, I don't know, radio frequency or something or other, could they get an older style analog meter that would still work with?
I mean, potentially. I mean, the bill is drafted right now.
I know
the answer is no.
Right.
Like they would have to have a smart meter for this.
Since you seem to know about this, that's what.
Just not to be dangerous. Technology. Yes.
Thanks.
Rep Kleppner?
Do you have any sense of on rental units? You know, do they skew more dumb meter or more smart meter, or is it the same kind of 10%?
My best guess, a lot of our commercial or non-single family home are often smart meters in terms of our territory, I believe. And they're often also, not all of them, but some of them are more master metered. So it's just the owner of the building that is receiving that. Not, like I said, not for all circumstances, but for some of the larger ones where electricity is included in the price of rent and other things as well. So there might not be individual customer meters per unit. It really kind of depends on the nature of the building, but a lot of those at this point have deployed smart meters.
Thank you.
Another important point that we had also discussed in the Senate, and I think you heard from Mr. Port at the department too, that didn't really get as much time in there, was related to the consumer protection angle of these devices. Certainly, you know, they are marketed and discussed as a way for customers to save money on their electricity bills. And I think it's an important thing to consider who's going to be reviewing how they are marketed and if the customer purchases one and feels like it's not meeting that claim, where are they going to go to call and have a complaint or discussion? I don't think it makes sense for that to be necessarily the Department of Public Service and their folks. It feels more like an Attorney General consumer protection conversation. And so that was not, that feels also like an important point for the committee to consider how that would show up and what role their office would have in some of that.
We're going to hear from the AG.
Perfect. I thought
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Because one thing I'm curious about is, and this is not your wheelhouse, but whether we need to do or say anything, or whether this just doesn't already fall under whatever the AG does in terms of consumer complaints and protections anyway. So we've invited them. I think, Alex, we'll go over next week's agenda later in the day. But we definitely want to hear from the AG on this.
Yeah, I thought you might, and I heard that earlier this week in one of your discussions as well. And I think that's an important conversation just to understand how it works just
how it
in
works
practice,
now.
for anything, exactly. And then if there's anything that's additional that would be needed here or not, based on their review of that,
Uh-huh.
that makes sense.
But I do agree with you, this doesn't feel like the department.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about the product.
Exactly. And I think even further, like in addition to that, as I mentioned, you know, in terms of how it shows up for a customer that has this, it's not something that they can sort of look back and track performance, right? Just by the nature of
Right.
how it would show up on their bill, right? So you might see a reduction in your consumption and load, which could be attributed to this performing on a sunny day and doing what it's supposed to do. Or it could be that, you know, you were on vacation for a little bit and weren't using as much in any one month, or you have purchased additional efficient appliances or other changes that might be made. And so I think it might be hard. It would certainly be impossible, candidly, if you were to call our call center and ask us how much.
Why is my bill
why
up
is
or
my-
down?
Exactly. We would not be able to attribute it specifically to what this device is doing or not doing.
Right.
Yep. So that I think is an important thing as well, because obviously we respond to questions that get raised by our customers at the department through CAPI, and provide information and help respond to any of that. But this one would be a tough one for us to have any information that would, you know, be directly related to that device.
Okay. Yeah.
A question about low-income families who are eligible for electrical upgrades currently. Is that something that you guys incentivize, or is it a different program?
So under the ARPA funding, there was a program for electric panel upgrades, because the legislature had appropriated, I can't remember the total amount of money. It was a
decent
good
chunk.
amount, yeah, for sure. And it was appropriated to the department and then to Efficiency Vermont, and we did help give those dollars out to customers that were eligible. I'm happy to follow up on the total number of that that were awarded and done through that grant. One thing that we actually focused on in the GMP territory was on helping to support some manufactured home communities that were in dire need of some customer facing electric upgrades for them to have EV chargers or heat pumps or other types of devices. And so that was one of our targeted areas that we focused on in that space. And then certainly also individual residential customers as well. So I think that program has expended all of the dollars to date. But it was a good focus area for a little while.
Yeah, because it seems like it could be helpful for this compliance.
Yeah.
Because we're learning that for safety reasons. You know, dedicated circuit, things like that.
Right.
And it seems like that could be effective.
Yeah.
Do you know if any of those ARPA funds, when you did electrical upgrades and panel upgrades, did any of them go to upgrading meters?
Oh, like if there's the answer, I would have to double check on that, just in terms of where the ownership of like the line is around meter sockets and other things, which is a little outside of my wheelhouse, but I'm happy to follow up on some of those specific things. I think if it was appropriate for safety reasons, the answer is probably yes. But I'm happy to cover that.
You don't need to.
Sorry.
The meters that are out there are the ones that are out there.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
No problem.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So Green Mountain Power is dependent on the underwriter laboratory 3700 in addressing the issue of the energized plug. I have concerns about approving something that's not there. It isn't invented yet, and I wish I could invent it because whatever. But is that basically GMP's position? Is that if as you disconnect it, if there's power in the outlet, as you disconnect it, that plug may have a potential for up to 2 seconds there, which is a long
Yeah, long in that time. So, in addition to that, the UL, certification, we also obviously have our own safety requirements that our workers are deploying whenever we're working, on our system, especially and specifically in emergencies, but in general, in terms of what our workers, and that's really what our focus is on something like this, and less on the home side, right? But it's certainly also obviously want our customers to be safe in that situation. But as we think about our own line workers who are doing work on our system, as any part of that work, we are testing and grounding as part of their safety rules before we start working on lines. And so if the line were to test as energized during that process, my understanding is that they would then work to find the source and isolate it, which is what our practice is for dealing with both existing solar that's out there on roofs, generators, other things that could push back into that space. And then once the line is appropriately grounded, any of that generation that's out there would be shorted out, which would protect our workers in that space. But in terms of the home side and that work, we would refer to some of the other electricians. I know you had heard from yesterday, Mr. Wimett, fire safety, others that are more focused on the customer side of these devices.
I'm not sure how you're doing with your points you want to get to.
I think those are the main ones that I
All right,
had
we
that
have
we hit.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Notification, liability.
So I know in the Senate initial version and at different points as folks are working through this, there had been a utility notification requirement, which we were supportive of taking out, mostly because it is large. It's an appliance, or consumer appliance, right? And so it's similar to we're not knowing necessarily when folks are installing more efficient refrigerator or additional appliances in their house. We didn't necessarily feel like we needed to also have a record of these devices, right? And so we're comfortable taking that part of the bill out.
My thinking had
Mhm.
been originally, because
Mhm.
it was in the House Bill too,
Yes.
that it might turn out to be important. Well, that you might want to know where they are
Mhm.
for more like, worker, right? Like, oh, we've got one here.
Yeah.
And also just to track their uptake, I guess, in the coming years. But I'm now shifting away from that. I think the appliance thing is kind of convincing to me. And then some other folks pointed out, it might have been Rep. Kleppner or somebody, that these are like portable.
Sure.
So, I mean, I realize they have to be stabbed into the ground, repellent. But, in general, if I buy one and I move, I'm going to uproot it and take it with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also somebody else pointed out like compliance could be really low. And so the data the most compelling thing I heard was that folks are probably may not do it or probably aren't going to do it or whatever. And so the data is going to be skewed anyway. So I've moved off of that.
Okay.
I don't know how other people feel. But then was it WEC? Somebody was interested in liability language. I'd be curious to get your take on it.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit to our utility counterparts in Vermont. I think it was Vermont Electric Co-op that might have specifically raised that point. Because I know that there was language in other bills that have passed in other jurisdictions. I think specifically Utah had a clause related to utility liability. So we're still chatting with them and happy to review any additional language. Typically our liability or utilities liability stops at the meter, just under general practice in terms of how the system operates and current rules out there. Obviously these are a little, different in terms of what they're doing at a home level or at an outlet level. So, happy to keep talking about if there feels like we need to be very clear where that line of liability is on something like this. But that's typically how it works under current practice already.
Okay.
So.
I mean, if it's sufficiently clear, that utility liability stops at the meter. You know, if everybody agrees that that's clear, then I wouldn't want to introduce language that actually muddies the waters or raises other prospects. But I really, you know, if the utilities can, if there's consensus on that, or you guys get to consensus on that, I guess just keep us posted.
Absolutely. And that's what that's what we're committed to doing, is still talking, and certainly always happy to hear legal perspectives that feel like we got to be really clear. And I appreciate your invitation to keep you posted as we just work to understand.
Because we'll continue to work on this next week.
Okay.
Next week is another weird week with committee time and
Yeah.
long floor and caucuses of the whole and assemblies and all that. But we're taking another round of testimony on this next week. And then I think by the end of next week, we might have taken all of our foundational testimony. And if we're there, we'll try to mark up the bill.
Great. That sounds great. Yeah, we can commit to sharing
Like sometime next
final
week.
thoughts next week.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. All righty. Thank you so much for changing your schedule to
No
join
problem.
us at 9.
Yeah.
And we're off to the floor. We can go off live. We're back at 1:00 to take a straw poll on appropriations amendments to H718 residential energy codes and H740 greenhouse gas. And then we're done for the day. So
Thank you.
1:00.